right? What if it all worked out instead of what if it doesn't work out? But I think for me, it was a definite light bulb, like kind of light switch moment for me as I absorbed that, and I really started watching each of my decisions from there on out and thinking more in the what if it all works out and less of it what if it doesn't work out.
Hi, and welcome to Transforming Millions, where women leaders get real about what it really takes to make world-changing impact without life-sucking consequences. On today's show, we're talking with pediatric neuropsychologist who translates applied brain science into the office, home, classroom, and everyday life in ways that people can relate to and apply. She helps parents effectively and efficiently learn to look at kids as little brains so they can raise happy, connected, successful humans, building kids' brains without losing their own minds. She's a mom, teacher, a parent and teacher strategist, a doctoral professor, and a program consultant who has spent over 15 years studying neuroscience. And as if that wasn't all impressive enough, she is also the author of an international best-selling book, Raising Brains. Her work has been featured in numerous well-known media outlets, including Forbes, ABC, NBC, NPR, and many, many more. And I am so pleased to welcome today Dr. Sarah Allen. Sarah, I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Thank you.
Well, I did too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, gosh, that is quite an impressive bio. And one of the things that I've always loved about you and the work that you do as well is that it's like, I feel like you're getting them from day one. Like, I feel like I have people coming to me that feel like my parents did this and this was messed up and this happened when I was in third grade. Not that I'm a therapist, but as a coach, a lot of those old past experiences play into life. And I feel like so much of what you do is like from the beginning, trying to build happy, confident, successful, able to kind of take care of themselves and problem solve themselves, all of that, little human beings. So tell us a little about how you got here and why you're so passionate about what you do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just tagging off of what you just said, I do think that the way that we were raised and the patterns of relationships and communication that we were exposed to really impacts us as adults and then as parents and then back to our kids. So I think it's a cycle that I've been really interested in having my own kids. You study this stuff for years and years and years and years. And then when you actually have your own children, and mine right now I have four from 11 to 17, and you watch them develop and grow, and it's like a whole new it's a whole new ball game, and you really get to see how your own patterns come out when you're a parent as a professional, and then how they impact the development of your kids. So I really became interested in that probably more so over the pandemic. And it was my mom who said to me, people don't think about kids like this. People don't think about raising kids like this. And that's when I wrote the book, Raising Brains, and realized how much this pattern was really important. And then kind of as we came out of the pandemic a bit, we started seeing really high rates of suicide, of depression, of anxiety. Just in our local area, we've had 3 suicides in the last 7 months, probably 1 within this last month. And it really shows you how important it is to have good mental health foundations. Like you said, catching it early on and working to build coping skills and adaptive skills and emotional regulation and management skills so that kids are equipped for this. And we deal with this ourselves, as adults. And I think that that's where I got really interested in these patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it's such a different world too than what we grew up in and what we dealt with. Like my mom the other day was like, well, first off, she watches way too much news and too much particular news that I'm especially not in agreement with. But nonetheless, she said the other day to me something about, what the heck is wrong with these kids today? Like, why can't they cope? Why are they all depressed? And I was like, well, we didn't grow up with having to worry about if like a shooter was going to come into our school or, all kinds of other things, the social media, like all the things that prior generations really haven't even had to deal with. And these kids, it's like constant sources of anxiety. And then what do they do with that?
Well, I think it's funny that she said, why can't they cope? Because honestly, our generation can't cope. We don't really know how to cope and adapt. We grew up in a lot of houses where things were pushed under the rug. Everything was perfect. Everything was fine. And that really didn't allow us to understand our own emotions. And then, I think the generation right under us has started doing a lot of self-help, a lot of identifying their own emotions, but not really knowing exactly what to do with that. And then how to raise kids that don't fall to the other extreme. Whenever you're going to extremes, it's always an issue. So we really want to understand it and work with it. But yeah, I think we've all been through significant trauma just with pandemic. And then you add getting back and you add we are much more aware of the things happening, I think, than in other generations, just with the media and the way we have such easy access to these things. And so it's mostly a matter of figuring out, how to think about those things and how to absorb those things in a way that again creates these good mental health foundations instead of shying away and pretending they're not there and not exposing the kids to anything. It's really about slowly exposing and working with them as well as with yourself as you go through it to figure out how you feel about something and how you want to respond instead of responding with that gut emotion.
Yes. Yes. I just had an experience with that the other day with my 16-year-old where she said something and I kind of just had my like natural response that came out and it was very clear it was not the response she wanted to kind of go back later, like an hour or two later after I realized she really had kind of pulled back and withdrawn some after that. I was like, okay, can we try that again? I'm like, maybe what I should have asked was, how do you want me to respond to this? Like, what do you need from me right now? And yeah,
And
it's
that's a good model. I think we think we're supposed to be perfect, like we don't have emotions. And actually, the example you just gave is perfect. That is exactly how it should be, that you may respond in a way you don't want to, but how do you handle that? And the model that you gave your daughter is an excellent one, which is okay, I didn't like that, so I'm going to come back and try again. And that's relationships and that's communication. And even when I became a parent, I wasn't a teacher. I worked in schools and things like that, but I didn't realize how much you had to teach your children, and the skills you had to build in both yourself and in them until I had my own kids. And you realize that it doesn't come naturally and it is something you have to teach. So all of these interactions are teachable moments that we can work with them. And I think we do it even in our professional lives, as we feel emotional reactions. I realized at one point that I was doing a lot of it in my head. And now I'll have conversations with my kids about something that happened at work or how I responded to this or the interactions, because again, it's a good model for relationship and communication building so they can see it across the board.
yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. I'm so curious. One of the things that popped into my mind as you were saying that is I feel like there's almost two, and I don't think it's only black and white, like it's either this way or that way, but two distinct kind of parenting styles that I think I recognized is either the ones that are always like, let me teach you and show you like what it's supposed to be or how it's supposed to work or what you're supposed to do. And then there's the model of kind of helping them sort of figure out who they are and just like be with them in some ways. And I mean, maybe the ideal is a blend between the two, or maybe more of the teaching early on and more of the just being with them later on. But I'm curious for you, as this is your area of expertise, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny because although the book's called Raising Brains, the subtitle is Mindful Meddling to Raise
Mm,
Success.
I love that. Mindful meddling.
Because it is kind of that blend that you talk about. You definitely want to teach your kids, but you have to allow them to have that productive failure. We talk about it in business all the time, but we forget that that's how kids learn too, And so I think it is always the seesaw of trying to make sure you're teaching, but then also letting them practice those skills and have that failure. And what you're teaching is really the process of learning, not necessarily each particular skill along the way. And so, you're always
Yeah.
going to get it wrong, but occasionally you'll get it right. And that's, there's a sweetness to that when you find that. And even in getting it wrong, like I said, it allows for this kind of growth mindset approach that happens in a house when everybody can have that productive failure, and it really breeds the things that you want to see. So I guess the answer to the question is yeah, it's a blend of those things and trying to find, I always say there's two magic questions. What does this brain need to learn? What can I teach this brain? And if you're constantly coming at things that way, you're going to end up finding the right skill. I noticed after working with a lot of parents and professionals that, sometimes they'll pick the wrong skill or a skill that I would have dug a little deeper in, but even just the thinking of that is going to be beneficial. And you want to look at that. I can give you a great example. Actually, I was just with my cousin on the beach and her daughter was running around. She has a little girl about 4 and then a little baby. And she had the baby on her lap and the 4-year-old would not stop leaving her, wouldn't leave her alone. She was all over her and she couldn't finish, feeding her and it was a mess. And she told her daughter, you need to give me some time and space. And it was interesting in that interaction because her husband was behind her and if she asked for help and he said, well, if you're going to say that you have to stand by that. And it reminded me that he was probably thinking she needs to learn to listen, and I'm sure my cousin was thinking, oh, well, there's a lot of, this, she needs some love and I need to give her love. But
Right.
really what I saw was that this girl loves her mom and that's a great thing, but she wants attention and she needs to learn how to get that in a way that's going to fulfill that need in her, but
Mm.
also be an appropriate way to do that within that relationship. And so we ended up making a 5 minute, baby gets 5 minutes, you get 5 minutes. And then she's so excited about it. And every time she came over, so proud of you for letting your baby sister have some time, but then you also get time with your mommy too, because you
Mhm.
guys love each other too. And just in that little interaction with even the little kids, because I'm out of the little kid stage, so it's fun
Right.
to watch. You realize that yes, they're looking for the skill, but you really want to dig in to think, how can I, for my child, what is the skill that they need to build? And I think that just takes some practice and guidance a bit, like a little bit of
Yeah.
coaching. But once you get used to it, it's really that you're finding your way on that seesaw, and you're really figuring out, when do I teach and when do I kind of let them learn how to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think so many in our audience, so many of our viewers and listeners probably are parents, and many, I find many of my clients, I would say maybe even all of my clients, quite honestly, have maybe some things they wish had been done differently when they were the way they were parented and brought up. I mean, sometimes like super traumatic past experiences and how they were parented or not parented maybe is more the appropriate way sometimes. But I do feel like sometimes people almost will, like, overshoot the opposite direction,
Right.
like, if I was over-disciplined or I feel like my parents were really hard on me or, like, beat down on me, like, I'm never gonna discipline my kid. But it's like, discipline doesn't have to mean, like, beating your child. Discipline could mean
Right.
setting and enforcing boundaries.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so it's interesting to hear some of that on, like, how do we find those healthy balances and finding the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trick is guide, don't direct, don't
Okay.
demand. You're really trying to guide, and checking your own biases, really working to think, why do I want to respond this way? For me, I have a couple different biases. I was the oldest child. I wasn't allowed to go out and do things as much as my younger sisters ended up. So when my kids ask to go out past 9 o'clock and it's dark and they're on their bikes, I'm immediately will say no. And I've realized with thinking about myself and thinking, with my partner's help too, that, wait a minute, is it okay? My first response is always no, because that's kind of where I was. Yes. Yes, you can. And I can give them more because I want them to build independence. So by checking that bias, that helps me. And I also have a little more trouble sometimes with my son than my daughter because, I lost some kids before I had my kids. I lost three boys. And so I noticed that whenever my son will ask me to do something, I'm more likely to want to be like, no, come here, come back. And
Mm.
I have to check. I've always, since he's been little, I've had to check that bias and say, wait a minute, he can do this. And talking back about relationships, because I can express that to him, he also knows that because we're in a relationship, I need him to check in a little bit more. And so, because we've had that conversation, he checks in a little bit more, maybe even than my daughter does. And I give him a little bit more independence. And, that's something we don't really work on sometimes with our kids, is thinking about it as that two-way street. We do it with our relationships. We do it in our businesses, but we don't really think about the fact that it's okay to say to your child, I have trouble with this. Can you do this to support me? And I'll
Mm.
do this to support you. And I think, especially as our kids get older in these teenage years, as you're really preparing them, you don't have much time before they can go out on their own. To build that in early on is helpful to them in the long run and also supportive of your relationship so you don't end up doing that teenage clash.
Yes, I tease my kids about how occasionally we'll be walking through a parking lot and one of them will like kind of pull me like, "Mom, watch out, there's a car," and like pull me away from the car. And I'm like, dang, I thought by now you'd be trying to push me into onto the So I know you work one-on-one with parents and with kids both. I know you've worked in school systems. You also work with organizations, corporations, helping them with their employees as well. What would you say are some of the best or most fulfilling parts of your work?
I think I'm really interested in helping people see things a little bit differently. I appreciate a lot of the parenting books and parenting things out there, but I think especially as an entrepreneur and a woman that has kids and wants it all, right? In certain ways, you run into a lot of extremes. And I really wanted something that was efficient and effective. And so I really enjoy doing the group trainings that I do, both in schools and in organizations with working parents, because I think it's really exciting when you come across a program that talks to you about how to think about it. It's almost like, getting a degree, right? It's like trying to see it and there's no manual for this parent thing. They just, you have to do more to drive a car, I always say. So
Yeah.
it's really, I find it very fulfilling when you can be in a room and have found a way to describe these things simple and efficient and effective tools that people can learn how to see things, because kids are, like you said, the black and white does not exist. And so, you learn a couple things, and then when those tools don't work, you feel helpless again. And it's that helpless feeling that creates all of the other issues you have as parents, because you get self-conscious about it. You don't know what to do. But when you have a good bag of tricks and you can create your own bag of tricks because you've learned how to approach it and how to see it, that's when creating independence in the people that you're working with, and people really feel confident and supported, and they can do a lot of that work on their own. Whether it be a check-in here or there is fine, but not a consistent need for the support. They can stand on their own 2 feet. So I think that's the most fulfilling part to what, I talk a lot about building skills versus managing behavior. When you're in that managing behavior stage, we know this with employees. When you're managing somebody's behavior, you're not having growth. It's taxing on you as a supervisor. None of it's working. It's the same with kids. Once you start growing these skills, they become independent and helping themselves more, helping you more, and everybody thrives in that household. So that's really been, I think, the most fulfilling.
Beautiful. I love it. I love anytime that's, it's kind of the whole like, feeding a man or teaching a man to fish kind of thing. Like you're giving people the skills to be able to fish for life so that they can be teaching their kids to fish for life.
Exactly. I think that's I've had some really I've been blessed with some bigger contracts lately where I can do more systemic work. We've done one in full districts and schools, but we also did one at a camp this summer. And I think the most exciting part about that is these are 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old counselors. And, I'm in his leadership training, and, I got very emotional because what I'm really passionate about doing is if we can get them at that age and they're helping to grow these kids' brains that work with them, they're seeing kids differently. Imagine when they become parents or work in the field or try to change the world in some way or develop a product or whatever it is, to be able to see, to start out that young seeing it, that's when you've really hit it. And it was so exciting to train the entire camp this summer to really be able to start that process. It's neat to think about that next generation having a different viewpoint.
That is awesome. I got goosebumps through that. That was like the best thing ever to be able to. That's
It
so
was really
cool.
exciting.
So cool. So let's take a minute if we can to talk some about some challenges along the way for you. If like for you personally with I do a lot of mindset for lack of a better word work, but some of that inner growth, how we deal with challenges and struggles. And you actually were in a brief workshop of mine. I did just a 3-hour workshop and you had quite a aha moment that actually resulted in a neon sign for you.
That's right. That's right.
Can we talk a little bit about that? About like one of the this challenge that you faced and how, what's kind of shifted for you since that opening up?
Sure. We talked a little bit about it actually during this, the idea of checking your own biases and understanding where you're coming from. And I think as you're growing your business, and for me, I had a clinical practice for years, but, after I wrote the book, it became there was a business side to it that I hadn't learned. It was exciting and interesting, but it's a whole different roller coaster, as when it comes to creating that kind of lifestyle for yourself. And so I would hit these moments where I kept feeling like stalled or frustrated and feeling the downs more than the ups. And I think by kind of going back and checking into my own history, my own life, as I mentioned before, no was always the response before yes. And I think looking at it, there's a lot of anxiety in my family, and my mom had, three kids under six at one point. And so she was very overwhelmed running around without much support. And so I think the no is the easy answer, but I absorbed that at some point. So whenever I went to take a risk in a business, it'd be like, oh no, well, that's a little too risky or that doesn't make sense. And it probably won't happen. Well, it could be a problem, and I think as we dug into that more, I realized, well, wait a minute, all evidence really did the contrary on some point from my own experience recently. And two, what if I started thinking the opposite direction, right? What if it all worked out instead of what if it doesn't work out? And that's actually my neon sign is what if it all works out? And once we found that, you've given some great testimonials about different people and how that's helped them. But I think for me, it was a definite light bulb, like kind of light switch moment for me as I absorbed that. And I really started watching each of my decisions from there on out and thinking more in the what if it all works out and less of it, what if it doesn't work out. And it was this slow, gradual build of really being able to feel better personally and professionally. It's such a tie in there. And it really did make a huge shift in my life. And so it wasn't the day after, that all of a sudden I have, this huge business, but it really did have this slow growth for me. And I would say, I don't even remember when that, maybe within the last year, I've seen a huge boost in my business, but even more so, it comes naturally. It comes in a positive way that feels good. I don't overdo decisions or underdo decisions. I'm just kind of giving it up to the universe. And what if it does work out? And some version of it typically does. And it's a more positive outlook and way of seeing it.
Yeah, I love that because I feel so much, I really believe that life isn't as it is. People say, oh, it is what it is. Like, okay, there is some truth to what is or what is happening, but so many of us, it's not like we don't experience it as what is happening is the truth. It's like our perception, our lens that we're looking through. And so if you have a whole life of looking through a lens of, well, what if it doesn't work out? No, that's not going to work. That's too risky. That's a problem. And then you take off those lenses and put on this new lens of what if it does work out? You start seeing all these new opportunities and possibilities and pathways for where it could work instead of like dead ends where it can't work.
Well, the funny part about it is I am probably one of the most positive persons you will ever meet.
Yeah.
My partner, he's always saying, like, if somebody cuts us off, I'm more likely to think, oh, they had such a bad day. I hope their grandmother's okay. They just came from the hospital, like I have this whole and he's more like, no, they're actually jerks. We go back and forth about this, but I'm more likely to think the best of people, especially in what I do in my job and that things can get better. And so to find that kind of bias, like kind of deep under was really interesting to me because it's kind of a conflict. How can you be such a positive person, but then also think things may not work out? And, I think a lot of that had to do with even just the recent events that I had experienced. My sister had recently died of cancer. She was 29. So that was within the last few years. I told you before I had lost the kids, then the pandemic, I got divorced, moved to a new town, then the pandemic hit. So all of these things happened really quickly within the span of like 5 years. I hadn't processed any of the death of the kids either. I think it just barreled through. So as you're sitting here, as I said, we all kind of went through this trauma. My version was almost reliving some of this that I had experienced it because it never worked out for me. These things didn't work out. And I thought that I had just kind of given it up and said, all right, well, there's nothing I can do. Clearly I would have changed it if I could have, and I didn't.
Right.
I couldn't, but to have that leftover quality to it between, hearing no a lot and then also the anxiety in my family and then those experiences, it made that shift in my life. Like, wait, it could also work out, because my experience has been that some of it hadn't. But from the business side of it, it had. So I kind of had to lean into those things. And at that time period that you and I had talked, it was starting to work out. And there's always things that won't, but I think that having that more expectation of it happening and then dealing with it if it doesn't is different than having the expectation of it not happening and then dealing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you referred to it too as like almost like a light switch moment. I think for a lot of people it occurs that way because it's like we've only seen one thing or looked kind of from one perspective for so long, and then all of a sudden it's like on the Matrix when they say, once you take the pill, you can't unsee.
Right.
Once you've seen, you can't unsee it.
Right.
So yeah.
And you think you're okay with failure as an entrepreneur, that has to happen. But I think each little failure doesn't feel great. And you're like, well, is that the one I was supposed to have or not or the one I wasn't supposed to have? And does that mean I'm not good at this? Or does that mean that I'm not going to be able to move forward? Or does that mean I can? And it's very difficult, especially being on your own like that, to be able to work through all of those things too. And I think having that recognition, just that one little phrase, that's why I put it in neon sign, pink. It's a hot pink neon sign in my office.
I forget, did you get that for yourself or did your partner get that for you?
No, Kevin got that for me. My partner.
That's what I thought. I thought it was so cool. When you said, for our viewers, she sent me a text after the workshop with a picture of it. And I was like, oh my God, that is amazing. I love it.
Maybe we'll put it in the show notes or something.
To make sure you never forget again. What if it all works out? And you know what? That's part of environmental design that I often talk about with my clients as well, which is like design your spaces, not just your physical spaces, but also relationships and everything, which this was kind of a double whammy there. The relationship with your partner and the physical thing in your office space. Design your spaces to lift you up into the person that you want to be or that you are becoming, not, in the past, basically, that led to where we are now, kind of.
Yeah. And I think I jumped into a lot of things. I jumped into a relationship. I'm now getting married. We have 4 kids between the two of us, so a blended family. But in a slow way that kind of built on its own. I jumped into, we have a podcast. Kevin and I have a podcast called What's Happening Here. We kind of blend the science with our crazy family. And we didn't necessarily have a reason for starting that at the time. We started that and we were like, let's start this. Feels good to us. What if that works out? And that's been really exciting for us personally as well as professionally. And, a lot of projects that I'm just kind of saying, yeah, sure, let's try this. Some of them work out to be big, awesome projects. Some of them, haven't taken off yet, or, are relationships that'll come to fruition at some point. And, just that mindset has really shifted. And I think there's always work to do in that, in areas to really, and you kind of grow, especially since last time we talked, I've grown so much and then ready to take another look at things again as you hit the next level. So.
Yeah. Every time we get to that new level, it's like that new territory. We don't know where the saber-toothed tigers are. And it's the whole kind of like brings up all the old stuff again sometimes as well. And yeah, that's the topic for another show, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good point in the sense that, it sounds like, okay, I'm all fixed. But then as I get newer contracts and bigger contracts and really big contracts, I think I mentioned this to you the other day. I noticed, it almost feels like, oh, don't tell anybody, right? Like it almost feels like you can't be happy about that. And then I'm like, all right, gotta call Spencer, gotta work on that again.
Yeah. Always about finding that next level of freedom, freedom to grow, freedom to be fulfilled where you are and not be like the whole, this isn't it, or what if it all goes away? I think a lot of people I've worked with have that feeling of like, waiting for the rug to get pulled out from under them. And again, a lot of times it's from past experiences and we got to find ways to shift those, like, what are we expecting and looking for here that then can prompt that those new actions, new risks, new ways of being.
And I think it's about growth, right? And again, back to kids, this all cycles back. It's all the same. We all have the same brains, I always say. So it's all that same thing. And to be able to get to a level and then say, okay, I need to grow more. And again, speak with my kids about it. I'm noticing that this is happening for me here. And although this looks really exciting, and I always thank them, they're on a team with me, right? So if I have to take extra meetings and I can't go to a game or two and they recognize that, then, now that we have that extra contract, they should get some of the benefit of that too. And so we talk about that, but also them seeing then, okay, well, now I'm having this feeling and that's feeling uncomfortable for me. So I'm going to go and I'm going to work on that. I think that's important for them. It's growth. It's always growth. It's not a static process. You don't just get somewhere and be done. And I think that's good for them to see too. And so you're constantly feeding back your own work as an individual, then your work as a parent to your children, and watching that kind of, and then back as a professional, and it kind of cycles all together.
Yeah. Awesome. So what would you say for our viewers, to sort of a little golden nugget here, what would you say is the most important thing that people need to know or remember about succeeding in business or following your passion, your path?
Growth and balance, I think, is what it is, especially from a brain-based perspective. We're always trying to build these skills. We're always trying to learn. As I said before, any extreme is always detrimental to the brain. Too much or too little of something is always detrimental. I call them brain rule, life rules in my book. But I think it's really, if you're constantly thinking about growth. My partner always says, I'm trying. And, I say, well, it's the trying that makes you good. And I think that that is, a perspective to take both in your professional life, especially juggling life and family and work, but also as a parent to your kids. And I think that's why, a lot of, working with employees who are parents is really important because that cycles right back into your job. So either whether you are the boss, needing the cycle, or you want to provide that to your employees too, I think that it's about that, growth and balance and supporting all of those angles.
Awesome. All right. Well, for our viewers and our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Sarah or how you can build healthy brains for happier humans, you can check out her website at brainbehaviorbridge.com. And behavior is the American spelling without the U, Behavior. So brainbehaviorbridge.com. She's also offering a limited number of free 30-minute consultations. The link will be included in the show notes. It's a little long just to read verbally here, but we'll include it in the show notes there. And those are free 30-minute consults where you can meet with her about how you can help build healthier brains. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. I so appreciate you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I wish you the absolute best as you continue to grow and achieve your next levels of success.
Right back at you, Spencer. Thanks for having me.